All right, we seem to be live now. I think. Let's see. Oh, still private. Okay. I need to change that. Public? Yeah. All right. Should be live, I think. Need to check out. Now, I don't want to run the risk of... Oh, I'm live now. Sweet. All right. All right. All right. Okay. We are live now. Now, need to check out. Okay, fantastic. I'll just be waiting for somebody to show up. In the meantime, I'll send a couple of links. Bum, bum. Another one bites the dust. Bum, bum, bum. Another one bites the dust. Bum, 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 bum. Another one bites the dust. Bum, 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 bum. Another one bites the dust. Discworld. Discworld. Yeah. Discworld. All right, might as well do the recap. Thanks for that. Touched my microphone there. I still have this huge thing here, which is about as practical as it gets. I am Death, destroyer of worlds. I wish he is the coolest character. So you can see this awful thing here, which is sharp and rusty. Safety first. All right. Let me know if you want to see this site more often. Anyway, last time on The Color of Magic, first Discworld novel. Great book, by the way. Spoilers, it's a great book. Our hero, Rincewind, has been coerced by the totalitarian Patrician of the Ankh-Morpork city settlement to watch out for the tourist to Flower, who came into this town with his tourist ways to confuse and scare everyone else, because they never saw a tourist in their life. Immediately, it is brought up to our attention the dangers of letting into the city a wealthy individual that brings a completely different kind of value and coin, which might just single-handedly destroy the very economical foundation and capitalistic ways of Ankh-Morpork, and thus the world of the disc at large. So Terry Pratchett is throwing some basic satirical jabs at capitalism, basically. And now we get to continue and see what happens in this lovely continuation of the book I'm reading. I might stop after a while to answer some question if you have any. And if indeed I get somebody at all to watch this. Now then, let's continue. Rincewind reached the broken drum at a dead run, and was just in time to collide with a man who came out backwards fast. The stranger's haste was in part accounted for by the spear in his chest. He bubbled noisily and dropped dead at the wizard's feet. Well, that's a memorable encounter if I ever saw one. Rincewind peered around the doorframe and jerked back as a heavy throwing axe whirred past like a partridge. It was probably a lucky throw, a second cautious glance told him. The dark interior of the drum was a broil of fighting men, quite a number of them, a third and longer glance confirmed, in bits. Rincewind swayed back as a wildly thrown stool sailed past and smashed on the far side of the street. Then he dived in. He was wearing a dark robe, made darker by constant wear and irregular washings. In the raging gloom, no one appeared to notice a shadowy shape that shuffled desperately from table to table. At one point, a fighter, staggering back, trod on what felt like fingers. A number of what felt like teeth bit his ankle. He yelped shrilly and dropped his guard just sufficiently for a sword swung by a surprised opponent to skewer him. Rincewind reached the starway, sucking his bruised hand and running with a curious bent-over gait. A crossbow quarrel funked into the banister rail above him, and he gave a whimper. He made the stars in one breathless rush, expecting at any moment another more accurate shot. In the corridor above, he stood upright, gasping, and saw the floor in front of him scattered with bodies. A big black-bearded man, with a bloody sword in one hand, was trying a door handle. "Hey!" screamed Rincewind. The man looked around and then, almost absent-mindedly, drew a short throwing knife from his bandolier and hurled it. Rincewind ducked. There was a brief scream behind him as the crossbow man, sighting down his weapon, dropped it and clutched at his throat. The big man was already reaching for another knife. Rincewind looked around wildly, and then, with wild improvisation, drew himself up into a wizardly pose. His hand was flung back. "Asuniti! Kyurocha! Baislebor!" The man hesitated, his eyes flicking nervously from side to side as he waited for the magic. The conclusion that there was not going to be any hit him at the same time as Rincewind, whirring wildly down the passage, kicked him sharply in the groin. "Go, Rincewind." "Oh, we got somebody." Hey there, fella. I'm reading The Color of Magic as of continuation of last week. Got any question? Well, if you got any, I'll be sure to answer them. Oh boy, where was I? Oh, there you go. As he screamed and clutched at himself, the wizard dragged open the door, sprang inside, slammed it behind him, and threw his body against it, panting. It was quiet in there. It was quiet in here. Too quiet, you might say. You know what? Never mind the reference. It was quiet in here. There was two flowers sleeping peacefully on the low bed, and there, at the foot of the bed, was the luggage. Rincewind took a few steps forward, cupidity moving him as easily as if he were on little wheels. The chest was open. There were bags inside, and in one of them he caught the gleam of gold. For a moment, greed overcame caution, and he reached out gingerly. But what was the use? He'd never lived to enjoy it. Reluctantly, he drew his hand back, and was surprised to see a slight tremor in the chest's open lid. Hadn't it shifted slightly, as though rocked by the wind? Rincewind looked at his fingers, and then at the lid. It looked heavy, and was bound with brass bands. It was quite still now. What wind? Rincewind! Two flowers sprang off the bed. The wizard jumped back, wrenching his features into a smile. My dear chap, right on time. We'll just have lunch, and then I'm sure you've got a wonderful program lined up for this afternoon. That's great! That's great! Rincewind took a deep breath. Look, he said desperately, let's eat somewhere else. There's been a bit of a fight down below. A tavern brawl? Why didn't you wake me up? Well, you see, What? I thought I made myself clear this morning, Rincewind. I want to see genuine Porkian life. The slave market, the whore pits, the temple of small gods, the beggars' guild. Beggars have their own guild. Picture that in your mind. Must have got a good union. And a genuine tavern brawl. A faint note of suspicion entered Two Flowers' voice. You do have them, don't you? You know, people swinging on chandeliers, sword fights over the table, the sort of thing Harun the Barbarian and the Weasel are always getting involved in. You know, excitement. Excitement. Aren't you excited? Because I am. Rincewind sat down heavily on the bed. You want to see a fight, he said. Yes, what's wrong with that? For a start, people get hurt. Oh, I wasn't suggesting we get involved. I just want to see one, that's all. And some of your famous heroes. You do have some, don't you? It's not all dockside talk. And now, to the wizard's astonishment, Two Flower was almost bleeding. Oh, yeah, we had them all right, said Rincewind hurriedly. He pictured them in his mind and recoiled from the thought. All the heroes of the Circle Sea passed through the gates of Ankh-Morpork sooner or later. Most of them were from the barbaric tribes near the frozen hub, which had a sort of expert trade in heroes. Almost all of them had crude magic swords, whose unsuppressed harmonics on the astral plane played hell with any delicate experiments in applied sorcery for miles around. But Rincewind didn't object to them on that score. He wasn't much of a wizard to begin with, so I guess it's fair. He knew himself to be a magical dropout, so it didn't bother him that the mere appearance of a hero at the city gates was enough to cause retorts to explode and demons to materialize all through the magical quarter. No, what he didn't like about heroes was that they were usually suicidally gloomy when sober and homicidally insane when drunk. There were too many of them, too. Some of the most notable questing grounds near the city were a veritable hubbub in the season. There was talk of organizing a rota. He rubbed his nose. The only heroes he had much time for were Bravd and the Weasel. Hey, it's the two guys he's telling this story to in present time. thought I'd remind you that. Who was practically an academic by Hub standards, and that in that he could think without. Well, wait, I jumped a line, sorry. Let me start here. The only heroes he had much time for were Bravd and the Weasel, who were out of town at the moment, and Harun the Barbarian, who was practically an academic by Hub standards in that he could think without moving his lips. Harun was said to be roving somewhere turnwise. Look, he said at last, have you ever met a barbarian? Two Flowers shook his head. I was afraid of that, said Rincewind. Well, there was a clatter of running feet in the street outside and a fresh uproar from downstairs. It was followed by a commotion on the stairs. The door was flung open before Rincewind could collect himself sufficiently to make a dash for the window. But instead of the greed-crazed madman he expected, he found himself looking into the round, red face of a sergeant of the watch. It's not the night watch, don't get your hopes up. Don't get your hopes high. It's actually supposed to be Terry Pratchett satirizing on, well, the police or any sort of public officers not really being that good. You know, in the typical way the British tend to do, you know, with the stereotype of the British policeman that says, was all this done? Was all this done? Was all this done? I'm just generalizing here. But anyway, the Watch were always careful not to intervene too soon in any brawl where the odds were not heavily stacked in their favor. Like I said, satire. The job carried a pension and attracted a cautious, thoughtful kind of man. The sergeant glowered at Rincewind and then peered at the flower with interest. Everything all right here, then? He said. What's all this, then? See? It's similar. What did I tell you? Oh, fine, said Rincewind. Got help up, did you? The sergeant ignored him. Got held up, did you? This is the foreigner, done? He inquired. We were just leaving, said Rincewind quickly, and switched to Throb. To Flower, I think we ought to get lunch somewhere else. I know some places. He marched out into the corridor with as much aplomb as he could muster. The Flower followed, and a few seconds later there was a strangling sound from the sergeant as the luggage closed its lid with a snap, stood up, stretched, and marched after them, with its little adorable tiny feet. Yeah. Watchmen were dragging bodies out of the room downstairs. There were no survivors. The Watch had ensured this by giving them ample time to escape via the back door, a neat compromise between caution and justice that benefited all parties. Who are all these men? Said Two Flower. Oh, you know, just men, said Rincewind, and before he could stop himself, some part of his brain that had nothing to do took control of his mouth and added, heroes, in fact. Really? When one foot is stuck in the grey miasma of Harul, it is much easier to step right in and sink rather than prolong the struggle. Rincewind let himself go. Yes, that one there is Erik Strongintherm. Over there is Black Znell. He's Harun the Barbarian here, said to Flower, looking around eagerly. Rincewind took a deep breath. That's him behind us, he said. The enormity of this lie was so great that its ripples did in fact spread out on one of the lower astral planes as far as the magical quarter across the river, where it picked up tremendous velocity from the huge standing wave of power that always hovered there and bounced wildly across the Circle Sea. You've got to love these analogies. A harmonic got as far as Harum himself, currently fighting a couple of gnolls on a crumbling ledge high in the Kadarak Mountains, and caused him a moment's unexplained discomfort. Okay, funny thing. Harun the Barbarian is going to be actual major character in the second part of this book. Of course, it's going to be silly. Why wouldn't it be? Two Flower, meanwhile, had thrown back the lid of the luggage and was hastily pulling out a heavy black cube. "This is fantastic," he said. "They're never going to believe this at home." What's he going on about?" said the sergeant doubtfully. "He's pleased you rescued us," said Rincewind. I remind you that Two Flower is actually speaking a different language altogether, which only Rincewind can understand, because he happened to speak, say, language that they both can understand. It's really fun in a roundabout sort of way. He looked sidelong at the black box, half expecting it to explode. Or emit strange musical tones. "Ah," said the sergeant. He was staring at the box, too. Two Flower smiled brightly at them. "I'd like a record of the event," he said. "Do you think you could ask them all to stand over by the window, please? This won't take a moment. And, Rincewind?" "Yes?" Two Flower stood on a tiptoe to whisper. "I expect you know what this is, don't you?" "I also expect all of you to know what this is." Rincewind stared down at the box. It had a round glass eye protruding from the center of one face, and a lever at the back. "Not wholly," he said. "It's a device for making pictures quickly," said Two Flower. "Quite a new invention. I'm rather proud of it, but look, I don't think this gentleman would, well, I mean, they might be sort of apprehensive. Could you explain it to them? I'll reimburse them for their time, of course." "He's got a box with a demon in it that draws pictures," said Rincewind shortly. Oh. Anyone to know what the funniest part of this is? He's not joking. Do what the madman says, and he will give you gold. The watch smiled nervously. "I'd like you in the picture, Rincewind. That's fine." Two Flower took out the golden disc that Rincewind had noticed before, squinted at its unseen face for a moment, muttered, 30 seconds should about do it, and said brightly, "Smile, please." I hope I gave you nightmares. "Smile," rasped Rincewind. There was a whir from the box. "Right. High above the disc, the second albatross soared, so high, in fact, that its tiny mad-orange eyes could see the whole of the world and the great, glittering, girdling circle sea. There was a yellow message capsule strapped to one leg. Far below it, unseen in the clouds, the bird that had brought the earlier message to the Patrician of Ankh-Morpork flopped gently back to its home. Rincewind looked at the tiny square of glass in astonishment. There he was, all right. A tiny figure in perfect color, standing in front of a group of watchmen whose faces were each frozen in a terrified rictus. A buzz of wordless terror went up from the men around him as they craned over his shoulder to look. Grinning, Two Flower produced a handful of the smaller coins Rincewind now recognized as quarterinu. He winked at the wizard. "I had similar problems when I stopped over in the Brown Islands," he said. "They thought that the iconograph steals a bit of their souls. Laughable, isn't it? I find it laughable that it's called the iconograph in this universe instead of as opposed to, you know, the photograph. Yard, said Rincewind, and then, because somehow that was oddly enough to keep Happy's side of the conversation, added, I don't think it looks very like me, though. It's easy to operate, said to Flower, ignoring him. Look, all you have to do is press this button. The iconograph does the rest. Now, I'll just stand over here next to Haroon, which is not really Haroon, and you can take the picture. One of these days, I'm going to get a stroke after saying Haroon too many times. The coins quietened the man's agitation in the way that gold can, and Rincewind was amazed to find, half a minute later, that he was holding a little glass portrait of Two Flower, wielding a huge notched sword and smiling as though all his dreams had come true. They lunched at a small eating house near the brass bridge, with the luggage nestling under the table. The food and wine, both far superior to Rincewind's normal fare, did much to relax him. Things weren't going to be so bad, he decided. A bit of invention and some quick thinking, that was all that was needed. Two Flowers seemed to be thinking too. Looking reflectively into his wine cup, he said, Tavern fights are pretty common around here, I expect. Oh, fairly. No doubt fixtures and fittings get damaged. Fixed? Oh, I see. You mean like benches and whatnot? Yes, I suppose so. That must be upsetting for the innkeepers. I've never really thought about it. I suppose it must be one of the risks of the job. The Flower regarded him thoughtfully. I might be able to help there, he said. Risks are my business. I say, this food is a bit greasy, isn't it? You did say you want to try some typical Morporkian food, said Rincewind. What was that about risks? Oh, I know all about risks. They're my business. I thought that's what you said. I didn't believe it the first time either. Oh, I don't take risks. About the most exciting thing that happened to me was knocking some ink over. I assess risks, day after day. Do you know what the odds are against a house catching fire in the Red Triangle district of Best Pelagic? 538 to 1. I calculated that, he added with a trace of pride. What? Rincewind tried to suppress a burp. What for? Excuse me? He helped himself to some more wine. For, Two Flower paused, I can't say it in Trob, he said. I don't think the Betrobi have a word for it. In my language, well, we call it, he said a collection of outlandish syllables. In sewer ants. In sewer ants. He is an in sewer ants agent. Okay then. I was actually laughing like a maniac the first time I read this. In sewer ants, repeated Rincewind. That's a funny word. What's it mean? Well, suppose you have a ship loaded with, say, gold bars. Okay? It might run into storms or be taken by pirates. Okay? You don't want that to happen, so you take out an in sewer ants policy. One more for good measure. I work out the odds against the cargo being lost, based on weather reports and piracy records for the last 20 years. Then I add a bit, then you pay me some money based on those odds. Insurance for dummies, everyone. And the bit, Rincewind said, waggling a finger solemnly. And then, if the cargo is lost, I reimburse you. Rebars? Pay you the value of your cargo, said the flower patiently. Oh, I get it. It's like a bet, right? A wager, in a way, I suppose. And you make money at this in sewer ends, derp. It offers a return on investment, certainly. Wrapped in the warm yellow glow of the wine, Rincewind tried to think of in sewer ants. This will never get old to me. In Circle C terms. I don't think I understand this in sewer ants, he said firmly, idly watching the world spin by. Magic now. Magic I understand. I think he's getting drunk, by the way. The flower grinned. Magic is one thing, and reflected sound as of underground spirits is another, he said. What? What? That funny word you used, said Rincewind impatiently. Reflected sound of underground spirits? Never heard of it. The flower tried to explain. Rincewind trying to understand. I guess this is self-commentary. Okay, water break. So far, it is really witty and funny. What do you think? Okay. Now, before continuing, let me show this link to someone else. Consider this a 2-minute break, 1-minute break. Okay. Okay. Continuing on. Last time on The Color of Magic, Two Flower tried to explain, Rincewind tried to understand. Classic. There's this light on the bloody mirror over there. It's causing some lens flare. Oh well. Look, might be annoying, but imagine if this were, I don't know, some J.J. Abrams film, like the first Star Trek, not the second one, the one that people generally enjoy. The lens flare, lens flare mode, no lens flare mode. Lens flare mode, no lens flare mode, okay. Directed by J.J. Abrams. In the long afternoon, they toured the city turnwise of the river. Two Flower led the way, with the strange picture box slung on a strap around his neck. Rincewind trailed behind, whimpering at intervals and checking to see that his head was still there. A few others followed too. In a city where public executions, duels, fights, magical feuds, and strange events regularly punctuated the daily round, the inhabitants had brought the profession of interested bystander to a peak of perfection. They were to a man highly skilled gopers. In any case, Two Flower was delightedly taking picture after picture of people engaged in what he described as typical activities. And since a quarter renew would subsequently change hands for their trouble, it's actually in quotation marks, a tale of bemused and happy neveu riche new rich people, basically. Neveu riche was soon following him in case this madman exploded in a shower of gold. As the temple of the At the temple of the seven-handed Sek, a hasty convocation of priests and ritual heart transplant artisans agreed that the 100-span-high statue of Sek was altogether too holy to be made into a magic picture. But the payment of 2 Renu left them astoundingly agreeing that perhaps he wasn't as holy as all that. Ah, religion. A prolonged session of the Hor Pits produced a number of colorful and instructive pictures, a number of which Rincewind concealed about his person for detailed perusal in private. As the fumes cleared from his brain, he began to speculate seriously as to how the iconograph worked. Even a failed wizard knew that some substances were sensitive to light. Perhaps the glass plates were treated by some arcane process that froze the light that passed through them. Something like that, anyway. Rincewind often suspected that there was something, somewhere, that was better than magic. He was usually disappointed. However, he soon took every opportunity to operate the box. Two-Flower was only too pleased to allow this, since that enabled the little man to appear in his own pictures. It was at this point that Rincewind noticed something strange. Possession of the box conferred a kind of power on the wielder, which was that anyone confronted with the hypnotic glass eye would submissively obey the most peremptory orders about stance and expression. It is the devil tool, let me tell you. It was while he was thus engaged in the Plaza of Broken Moons that disaster struck. Two-Flower had posed alongside a bewildered charm seller, his crowd of newfound admirers watching him with interest in case he did something humorously lunatic. Rincewind got down on one knee, the better to arrange the picture, and pressed the enchanted lever. The box said, "It's no good. I've rather pink." A turtle unnoticed door opened in front of his eyes. A small, green, and hideously warty humanoid figure leaned out, pointed at the color-encrusted palette in one clawed end, and screamed at him. "No pink, see?" screeched the homunculus. "No good you going on pressing the lever when there's no pink, is there? If you wanted pink, you shouldn't have took all those pictures of young ladies, should ya? It's monochrome from now on, friend, all right?" "All right, yeah, sure," said Rincewind. In one dim corner of the little box, he thought he could see an easel and a tiny unmade bed. He hoped he couldn't. "All right, well, this makes perfect logical sense to me. I mean, if the Flintstones can have little birds inside their stone-made photographic machines, that in the Discworld, I guess, you can have little imps living inside iconographs too. That flawless logic to me. Magic. Oh no, wait, no, it's not magic. It's something of underground spirits. So long as that's understood," said the imp, and shut the door. Rincewind thought he could hear the muffled sound of grumbling and the scrape of a stool being dragged across the floor. "Two-Flower," he began, and looked up. Two-Flower had vanished. As Rincewind stared at the crowd with sensations of prickly horror traveling up his spine, there came a gentle prod in the small of his back. "Turn without haste," said the voice like black silk, "or kiss your kidneys goodbye." The crowd watched with interest. It was turning out to be quite a good day. Rincewind turned slowly, feeling the point of the sword scrape along his ribs. At the other end of the blade, he recognized Stren Whittle. Stren Whittle. If you remember this guy, he was the sidekick of the leader of the Thieves Guild. Thief, cruel swordsman, disgruntled contender for the title of worst man in the world. Hi, he said weakly. A few yards away, he noticed a couple of unsympathetic men raising the lead of the luggage and pointing excitedly at the bags of gold. Whittle smiled. It made an unnerving effect on his scar-crossed face. I know you, he... Oh, wait, didn't Whittle add this kind of voice?
I know you, he said. A gutter wizard. What is that thing?
Rincewind became aware that the lead of the luggage was trembling slightly, although there was no wind, and he was still holding the picture box. This? It makes pictures, he said brightly. Hey, just hold that smile, will you? He backed away quickly and pointed at the box. For a moment, Whittle hesitated. What? He said. That's fine, hold it just like that, said Rincewind. The thief paused, then growled and swung his sword back. There was a snap, and a duet of horrible screams. Rincewind did not glance around for fear of the terrible things he might see, and by the time Whittle looked for him again, he was on the other side of the plaza, and still exhilarating. This is exciting. Aren't you excited? I am excited. Oh, man. Might have to cut this live event short. I think my eyes are bothering me a little bit. Perhaps it's not good to read in this lighting. It's the best artificial lighting I can afford right now, though. Okay. All right. The albatross descended in wide, slow sweeps that ended in an undignified flurry of feathers and a thump as it landed heavily on its platform in the Patrician's bird garden. Pardon me, I'm so sorry. The custodian of the birds, dozing in the sun and hardly expecting a long-distance message so soon after this morning's arrival, jerked to his feet and looked up. A few moments later, he was scuttling through the palace's corridors holding the message capsule and, owing to carelessness brought on by surprise, sucking at a nasty beak wound on the back of his hand. I enjoy this dry, non-direct sort of humor. It is full of the wits. Rincewind pounded down an alley, paying no heed to the screams of rage coming from the picture box, and cleared a high wall with his frayed robe flapping around him like the feathers of a disheveled jackdaw. He landed in the forecourt of a carpet shop, scattering the merchandise and customers, dived through its rear exit trailing apologies, skidded down another alley and stopped, teetering dangerously, just as he was about to plunge unthinkingly into the Ankh, which is the river that crosses in the middle of the city, which divides Ankh from Morpork. You know. There are said to be some mystic rivers, one drop of which can steal a man's life away. After its turbid passage through the twin cities of the Ankh could have been one of them. In the distance, the cries of rage took on a shrill note of terror. Rincewind looked around desperately for a bot, or a handhold up the sheer walls on either side of him. He was trapped. Unbidden, the spell welled up in his mind. It was perhaps untrue to say that he had learned it. It had learned him. The episode had led to his expulsion from Unseen University, because, for a bet, he had dared to open the pages of the last remaining copy of the creator's own grimoire, the Octavo, while the university librarian was otherwise engaged. The spell had leapt out of the page and instantly burrowed deeply into his mind, from whence even the combined talents of the Faculty of Medicine had been unable to coax it. Precisely which one it was they were also unable to ascertain, except that it was one of the 8 basic spells that were intricately interwoven with the very fabric of time and space itself. Figures. You got a wizard, doesn't know any spell, the only spell he actually knows could very well destroy reality as we know it. Good going, Rincewind. Since then, it had been showing a warring tendency, when Rincewind was feeling run down or especially threatened, to try to get itself said. So that's just great, isn't it? Yeah. The spell itself is self-aware. Oh boy. He clenched his teeth together, but the first syllable forced itself around the corner of his mouth. His left hand raised involuntarily and, as the magical force whirled him round, began to give off octarine sparks. The luggage hurtled down the corner, its several hundred knees moving like pistons. Rincewind gaped. The spell died, unsaid. The box didn't appear to be hampered in any way by the ornamental rug draped roguishly over it, nor by the thief hanging by one arm from the lid. It was, in a very real sense, a dead weight. Further along the lid were the remains of 2 fingers, owner unknown. This is one luggage you do not want to mess with. The luggage halted a few feet from the wizard and, after a moment, retracted its legs. It had no eyes that Rincewind could see, but he was nevertheless sure that it was staring at him, expectantly. Shoo! 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 Go away! Shoo! He said weakly. It didn't budge, but the lid creaked open, releasing the dead thief. Rincewind remembered about the gold. Presumably the box had to have a master. In the absence of Two-Flower, had it adopted him? The tide was turning, and he could see debris drifting downstream in the yellow afternoon light towards the river gate, a mere 100 yards downstream. It was the work of a moment to let the dead thief join them. Even if it was found later, it would hardly cause comment. And the sharks in the estuary were used to solid regular meals. Rincewind watched the body drift away and considered his next move. The luggage would probably float. All he had to do was wait until dusk and then go out with the tide. There were plenty of wild places downstream where he could wade ashore, and then, well, if the Patrician really had sent out word about him, then a change of clothing and a shave should take care of that. In any case, there were other lands, and he had a facility for languages. Let him but get to Chimera and or Gunning or Ekalpon, all names of places, by the way, and half a dozen armies couldn't bring him back. And then, wealth, comfort, security! There was, of course, the problem of Two-Flower. Rincewind allowed himself a moment's sadness. Man. It could be worse, he said by way of farewell. It could be me, our hero, everybody. It was when he tried to move that he found his robe was caught on some obstruction. By craning his neck, he found that the edge of it was being gripped firmly by the luggage lid. You're not going anywhere, man. Gurpal, You know what? I just decided that the Patrician has to have the voice of Montgomery Burns. Ah, Gurpal, said the Patrician pleasantly. Ah, Gurpal. Excellent. Ah, excellent. Come in, sit down. Can I press you to a candid starfish? I am yours to command. I am yours to command, master, said Gurpal, which now sounds like Smithers. I hope so, at least. Said the old man calmly. Save perhaps in the matter of preserved echinoderms. The patrician shrugged and indicated the scroll on the table. Read that, he said. Gorpal picked up the parchment and raised one eyebrow slightly when he saw the familiar ideograms of the Golden Empire, which, I remind you, is where Two Flower came from. He read in silence for perhaps a minute, and then turned the scroll over to examine minutely the seal of the Observe. You are famous as a student of Empire affairs, said the patrician. Can you explain this? Knowledge in the matter of the Empire lies less in not in particular events than in studying a certain cast of mind, said the old diplomat. The message is curious, yes, but not surprising. This morning the Emperor instructed, the patrician allowed himself the luxury of a skull, instructed me, Gorpal, to protect this two-flower person. Now it seems I must have been killed. You don't find that surprising, Smithers? I mean, Gorpal? No, the Emperor is no more than a boy. He is idealistic, kin, a god to his people. Whereas this afternoon's letter is, unless I am very much mistaken, from 9 Turning Mirrors, the Grand Vizier. Of course it's the Grand Vizier! Also, his name is 9 Turning Mirrors. Interesting naming convention the Golden Empire has. He has grown old in the service of several emperors. He regards them as a necessary but tiresome ingredient in the successful running of the empire. He does not like things out of place. The empire was not built by allowing things to get out of place. That is his view. I begin to see, said the patrician. Quite so, Gorpal smiled into his beard. This tourist is a thing that is out of place. After acceding to his master's wishes, 9 Turning Mirrors would, I am quite sure, make his own arrangements with a view to ensuring that one wanderer would not be allowed to return home, bringing perhaps some disease of dissatisfaction. The Empire likes people to stay where it puts them. So much more convenient, then, if this two-flower disappears for good in the barbarian lands, meaning here, master. And your advice, said the patrician. Gorpal shrugged. Merely that you should do nothing. Matters will undoubtedly resolve themselves. However, he scratched an ear thoughtfully. Perhaps the Assassin's Guild? Dum 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 dum. Ah, yes, said the patrician. The Assassin's Guild. Who is the president at the moment? Zlarf Flannerfoot. Zlarf Flannelfoot, master. Have a word with him, will you? Quite so, master. The patrician nodded. It was all rather a relief. He agreed with 9 Turning Mirrors. Life was difficult enough. People ought to stay where they were put. Alrighty then. Oh, we've got 3 people in the chat, methinks. Hey there, folks. No, apparently, no, you're not the only one watching Guidex Miller. Apparently, there is another one that's just joined us now. Anyway, welcome. Do you have any questions for me? Any questions at all? Now, keep in mind the stream is about 30%, 30 seconds off, or even more, to compare to when I am talking right now. So I might answer your questions, whatever they might be, much later on. Sorry about that. Anyway, Brilliant constellations shone down on the Discworld. One by one the traders shuttered their shops. One by one the gone-offs, thieves, fine wires, whores, illusionists, backsliders and second-story men awoke and breakfasted. Wizards went about their polydimensional affairs. Tonight saw the conjunction of two powerful planets, and already the air over the magical quarter was easy with early spells. "Look," said Rincewind, "everything behind the sun is your realm to flower." That's not really what he said Rincewind. "This isn't getting us anywhere." He inched sideways. The luggage followed faithfully. Lid elf open and menacing. Rincewind briefly considered making a desperate leap up to safety. The lid smacked in anticipation. In any case, he told himself with sinking heart, the damn thing would only follow him again. It had that dogged look about it. Even if he managed to get to a horse, he had a nasty suspicion that it would follow him at its own pace. Endlessly. Swimming rivers and oceans, gaining slowly every night, while he had to stop to sleep. And then, one day, in some exotic city and years hence, he'd hear the sound of hundreds of tiny feet accelerating down the road behind him. "You've got the wrong man," he moaned. "It's not my fault. I didn't kidnap him." Yeah. "That is okay," says Guidexville. "Okay. Well, it's that, as long as it's fine with you. By the way, are you having a good time? I'm not the best reader out there, and the sound from my voice might seem inconsistent at times. That's because I have my physical microphone here in front of me, here on my left. And if I turn my head, the sound won't come out as clear. So, yeah, that's some technical hub I am dealing with here. But anyway, the box moved forward slightly. Now there was just a narrow strip of greasy jetty between Rincewind's heels and the river. A flash of recognition told him that the box would be able to swim faster than he could. He tried not to imagine what it would be like to drown in the Ankh. "It won't stop until you give in, you know," said a small voice conversationally. I almost bit my tongue off. By the way, thought you'd like to know. Rincewind looked down at the iconograph, still hanging around his neck. Its trapdoor was open, and the homunculus was leaning against the frame, smoking a pipe and watching the proceedings with amusement. I'll take you in with me, at least," said Rincewind through gritted teeth. "Oh, gritted teeth. I'll take you in with me, at least." The imp took the pipe out of his mouth. "What did you say?" he said. "I said I'll take you in with me, damn it! Damn it, Austin!" "Shoot yourself." The imp tapped the side of the box meaningfully. "We'll see you things first." The luggage yawned. That's something that well, I need to picture that in mind for a second there. The luggage yawned and moved forward a fraction of an inch. "Oh, all right," said Rincewind irritably, "but you'll have to give me time to think." The luggage backed off slowly. Rincewind edged his way back onto reasonably safe land and sat down with his back against the wall. Across the river, the lights of Ankh City glowed. "You're a wizard," said the picture imp. "You'll think of some way to find him." "Not much of a wizard, I'm afraid." You can just jump down on everyone and turn them into worms," the imp added encouragingly, ignoring his last remark. "No, turning to animals is an 8th level spell. I never even completed my training. I only know one spell." "Well, that'll do." "I doubt it," said Rincewind hopelessly. "What does it do then?" "Can't tell you. Don't really want to talk about it. But frankly, he sighed. No spells are much good. It takes 3 months to commit even a simple one to memory, and then once you've used it, poof, it's gone. That's what's so stupid about the whole magic thing, you know? You spend 20 years learning the spell that makes nude virgins appear in your bedroom, and then you're so poisoned by quicksilver fumes and half blind from reading old grimoires that you can't remember what happens next. That's an interesting way to look at the whole magic thing that I haven't considered before. That's food for thought, my friends. I never thought of it like that. Quite frankly, neither did I, said the imp. Hey, look, this is all wrong. When Two Flowers said they got a better kind of magic in the Empire, I thought... The imp looked at him expectantly. Rincewind cursed to himself. Well, if you must know, I thought he didn't mean magic, not as much. What else is there then? Rincewind began to feel really wretched. I don't know, he said. A better way of doing things, I suppose. Oh, Guide, it sounds fine to me. Thank you, Guide Expiller. That's encouraging. By the way, do you want to see something really cool? In case you haven't seen it already, because you probably weren't here from the beginning, I just happen to have here a real life scythe. Now, if you're not familiar with the Discworld series, then you might not know what's the deal with this scythe. Well, I actually explained this plenty in the previous episode from this, but stick around and you'll find out something really, really fantastic. You see how big this thing is? Jeez. I have a large room, as you can see, and I can barely fit in it. Ugh. Scary thought is scary. Anyway. So we're talking about different kinds of magic, I believe. Rincewind, better way of doing things, I suppose. Something with a bit of sense in it. Harnessing the lightning or something. The imp gave him a kind of but-beating look. Lightning is the spears hurled by the thunder giants when they fight. I'm pretty sure that in the context of this world, this sentence has to be taken at face value. It said gently, Established meteorological fact. You can't harness it. I know, said Rincewind miserably. That's the flaw in the argument, of course. I think we're all thinking of a different kind of harnessing here. You cannot put rains on thunders, that's for sure. Where is this world equivalent of Benjamin Franklin when you need him? The imp nodded and disappeared into the depths of the iconograph. A few moments later, Rincewind smelled the bacon frying. He waited until his stomach couldn't stand the strain anymore and rapped on the box. The imp reappeared. I've been thinking about what you said, it said before Rincewind could open his mouth. And even if you could get harness on it, how could you get it to pull a cart? What the hell are you talking about? Lightning, it just goes up and down, like a Randy Newman song. You'd want it to go along, not up and down, up and down. Anyway, it'll probably burn through the harness. I don't care about the lightning. How can I think on an empty stomach? It's something then. That's logic. I like this imp. He makes no sense, and at the same time, he's a no-nonsense kind of character. Splendid. How? Every time I move, that damn box flexes its hinges at me. The luggage on cue gaped widely. See? It's not trying to bite you, said the imp. There's food in there. You're no use to it, starved. Rincewind peered into the dark recesses of the luggage. There were indeed, among the chaos of boxes and bags of gold, several bottles and packages in oiled paper. He gave a cynical laugh, mooched around the abandoned jetty until he found a piece of wood about the right length. Wedged it as politely as possible in the gap between the lid and the box, and pulled out one of the flat packages. It held biscuits that turned out to be as hard as diamond wood. "Lordy hell!" he muttered, nursing his teeth. Captain, 8 Panthers Travelers Digestives, them," said the imp from the doorway to his box. "Saved many a life at sea, they have." "Oh, sure. Do you use them as a raft, or just throw them to the sharks as sort of watch them sink? What's in the bottles? Poison?" "Water." "But there's water everywhere. Why do you want to bring water?" "Trust." "Trust?" "Yes, that's what it didn't. The water here. See?" I'm just going to assume that taking a bath into the Ankh is not an healthy idea of a pleasant afternoon in a midsummer night dream, if you will. Rincewind opened the bottle. The liquid inside might have been water. It had a flat, empty flavor, with no trace of life. "Neither taste nor smell," he grumbled. "I'm beginning to suspect you don't have very, very healthy water around these parts, have you? I think it's obvious by now. Anyway, the luggage gave a little creak, attracting his attention. With a lazy air of calculated menace, it shut its lid slowly, grinding Rincewind's impromptu wedge like a dry loaf. All right, he said. "I'm thinking. You see? I'm thinking. This is me thinking. This is my thinking face." No, actually, my own thinking face is this. Do I look enough pretentious to you? Maybe if I tip my head like this? Or maybe like this? Enough with this nonsense. Yemor! Back to Yemor, the leader of the Thieves Guild. Yemor's headquarters were in the Leaning Tower at the junction of Rhyme Street and Frost Alley. At midnight, the solitary guard leaning in the shadows looked up at the conjoining planets and wondered idly what change in his fortunes they might herald. There was the faintest of sounds as of a gnat yawning. I don't know what a gnat is, so don't ask. The guard glanced down the deserted street and now caught the glimmer of moonlight on something lying in the mud a few yards away. He picked it up. The lunar light gleamed on gold, and his intake of breath was almost loud enough to echo down the alleyway. I wonder if it's gold that he just picked up. There was a slight sound again, and another coin rolled into the gutter on the other side of the street. By the time he had picked it up, there was another one, a little way off and still spinning. Gold was, he remembered, said to be formed from the crystallized light of stars. Until now he had never believed it to be true, that something as heavy as gold could fall naturally from the sky. As he drew level with the opposite alley mouth, some more fell. It was still in its bag. There was an awful lot of it, and Rincewind brought it down heavily onto his head. When the guard came to, he found himself looking up into the wild-eyed face of a wizard who was menacing his throat with a sword. In the darkness, too, something was gripping his leg. It was the disconcerting sort of grip that suggested that the gripper could grip a whole lot harder if he wanted to. "Where is he, the rich foreigner?" hissed the wizard. "Quickly!" "What's holding my leg?" said the man, with a note of terror in his voice. He tried to wiggle free. The pressure increased. "You wouldn't want to know," said Rincewind. "Pay attention, please. Where is the foreigner?" "Not here. They got him at Broadman's place." "They did?" "Everyone's looking for him, they are." "You're Rincewind, aren't you? You are." I don't know why I'm doing this. The box that bites people." "Oh, no, please." Rincewind had gone. The guard felt the unseen leg gripper release his, or as he was beginning to fear, its hold. Then, as he tried to pull himself to his feet, something big and heavy and square cannoned into him out of the dark and plunged off after the wizard. Something with hundreds of tiny feet. Oh boy, this is getting intense. Do you have any question at this point in time? Any doubts about the story that you might need clarification for? I'm here in case you need me. Oh boy. Oh man. Okay, moving on. With only his homemade phrase book to help him, Two Flower was trying to explain the mysteries of inn-sewer ends to Broadman. The fat innkeeper was listening intently, his little black eyes glittering. From the other end of the table, Eeyore watched with mild amusement, occasionally feeding one of his ravens with scraps from his plate. Beside him, Whittle paced up and down. You fret too much, said Eeyore, without taking his eyes from the two men opposite him. I can feel it, Stren. Who would dare attack us here? And the gutter wizard will come. He's too much of a coward not to. And he'll try to bargain. And we shall have him. And the gold. And the chest. This is me trying to sound suave. It's harder than you think. Whittle's one eye glared, and he smacked a fist into the palm of a black-gloved hand. Who would have thought there was so much sapient pearwood in the whole of the disc? He said. How could we have known? Sapient pearwood, on a cliff note, is the material that the luggage is made of. It's a living luggage, so that's why it's a big deal. Again, you fret too much. You fret too much, Stren. I'm sure you can do better this time, said Eeyore pleasantly. Ugh. The lieutenant snorted in disgust and strode off around the room to bully his men. Eeyore carried on watching the tourist. I like to say Eeyore. It was strange, but the little man didn't seem to realize the seriousness of his position. Eeyore had on several occasions seen him look around the room with an expression of deep satisfaction. He had also been talking for ages to Broadman, and Eeyore had seen a piece of paper change hands. And Broadman had given the foreigner some coins. It was strange. When Broadman got up and waddled past Emore's chair, the thief master's arm shot out like a steel spring and grabbed the fat man by his apron. "What was that all about, old friend?" asked Emore quietly. "Nothing, Emore. Just private business, like." "There are no secrets between friends, Broadman." "Yeah, well, I'm not sure about it myself, really. It's a sort of bet, see?" said the innkeeper nervously. "Insurance, it's called. It's like a bet that the broken drum won't get burned down." Broadman just insured his own bar without fully understanding what insurance policies are all about. This can only end well for everyone involved. I probably shouldn't have to explain that. I'm sorry. Emore held the man's gaze until Broadman twitched in fear and embarrassment. Then the thief master laughed. "This worm-eaten old tinder pile?" he said. "The man must be mad." "Yes, but mad with money. He says now he's got the can't remember the word, begins with a P. It's what you might call the stake money. The people he works for in the Agatean Empire will pay up if the broken drum burns down. Not that I hope it does burn down. The broken drum, I mean, it's like a home to me. It's the drum." "Not entirely stupid, are you?" said Emore, and pushed the innkeeper away. "Should I try to have Emore sound like He-Man? Just for lulzes and funsies and all the roller skates? Making up words right now? I'm beginning to be tired, that's why. I can try. I can most certainly try." What is this? Guide Expiller says, "I would have mean the imp sound like Choka." I mean, made the imp sound like the Joker. That's what I mean. Oh, that's what you mean, huh? Okay. Okay, I'll try. But what kind of Joker do you want me to have him sound like? Heath Ledger? Mark Hamill? Or the original TV Joker from 1960s Batman? Because that's the one I can do best. The choice is yours, my friend. Anyway, where we are. Is here. We are here, and then we are here, and then we are. Okay. The dorm slammed back on its hinges and thudded into the wall. "Oi, that's my door!" screamed Broadman. Then he realized who was standing at the top of the steps, and ducked behind the table a mere shaving of time before a short black dart sped across the room and thunked into the woodwork. Emore moved his hand carefully and poured out another flagon of beer. Won't you join me, Zlorf?" Yeah, I cannot do it, man. "Won't you join me, Zlorf?" he said levelly. "And put that sword away, Strand. Zlorf Flannelfoot is our friend." The president, I love the fact that guilds have presidents. The president of the Assassin's Guild spun his short blowgun dexterously and slotted it into its holster in one smooth movement. "Stren," said Emore. The black-clad thief hissed and sheathed his sword, but he kept his hand on the hilt and his eyes on the assassin. That wasn't easy. Promotion in the Assassin's Guild was by competitive examination, the practical being the most important, indeed the only part. Thus, Zlorf's broad, honest face was a welter of scar tissue, the result of many a close encounter. It probably hadn't been all that good-looking in any case. It was said that Zlorf had chosen a profession in which dark hoods, clocks, and nocturnal prowlings figured leisurely because there was a day-fearing trollish streak in his parentage. People who said this in earshot of Zlorf tended to carry their ears home in their hats. He strolled down the stairs. And just like that, we have this character that was just introduced to us as being perfectly characterized. Just like that. This is good writing. He strolled down the stairs, followed by a number of assassins. When he was directly in front of Emor, he said, "Aha! I've come for the tourist, Emor!" There, he sounds like Skeletor. Happy? "Is it any of your business, Lorf?" "Yes, Granger, Armand, Beastman, take him away." Two of the assassins stepped forward. Yeah, then Stren was in front of them, his sword appearing to materialize an inch from their throats without having to pass through the intervening air.
"Possibly I could only kill one of you,"
he murmured.
"but I suggest you ask yourselves, which one?"
"Look up, Slorf," said Emor. A row of yellow, baleful eyes looked down from the darkness among the rafters. "One step more, and you'll leave here with fewer eyeballs than you came with," said the Thief Master. This Thief Master is a true badass. I like him. "So sit down and have a drink, will you? Slorf, and let's talk about this sensibly. I thought we had an agreement. You don't rob, I don't kill. Not for payment, that is," he added after a pause. It's important to have standards in your guild-to-guild relationships. The more you know. Slorf took the proffered beer. "So," he said, "I'll kill him, then you rob him. Is he that funny-looking... then you rob him, Emor? Is he that funny-looking one over there?" "Yes." Slorf stared at Two Flower, who grinned at him. He shrugged. He seldom wasted time wondering why people wanted other people dead. It was just a living. It's a living! "Who is your client, may I ask?" said Emor. Slorf held up a hand. "Police!" he protested. "Professional etiquette!" "Of course. By the way..." "Yes?" "I believe I have a couple of guards outside." "Head." "And some others in the doorway across the street." "Formerly." "And two bowmen on the roof." A flicker of doubt passed across Slorf's face, like the last shaft of sunlight over a badly plowed field. The door flew open, badly damaging the assassin who was standing beside it. "Stop doing that!" shrieked Broadman from under the table. Slorf and Emor stared up at the figure on the threshold. It was short, fat, and richly dressed. Very richly dressed. This is where things really start to get good, by the way. I should warn you. There were a number of tall, big shapes looming behind it. Very big, threatening shapes. "Who's that?" said Slorf. "I know him," said Emor. "His name's Reps. He runs the Groaning Platter Tavern down the Brass Bridge. Stren, remove him." Rep held up a beringed hand. Stren Whittle hesitated halfway to the door as several very large trolls ducked under the doorway and stood on either side of the fat man, blinking in the light. Muscles the size of melons bulged in forearms like flour sacks. Each troll held a double-headed axe between thumb and forefinger. And now trolls are in the story. Broadman erupted from cover, his face suffused with rage. "Out!" I can't believe this guy's audacity. He screamed, "Get those trolls out of here!" No one moved. The room was suddenly quiet. Broadman looked around quickly. It began to dawn on him just what he had said, and to whom. A whimper escaped from his lips, glad to be free. He reached the doorway to his cellars just as one of the trolls, with a lazy flick of one ham-sized hand, sent his axe whirling across the room. The slam of the door and its subsequent splitting as the axe hit it merged into one sound. "Bloody hell, Emor!" exclaimed Slorf Flannerfoot. "What do you want?" said Emor. I am here on behalf of the Guild of Merchants and Traders," said Rerpf evenly, "to protect our interests, you might say, meaning the little man." Emor wrinkled his brows. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought I heard you say the Guild of Merchants. I hope it's not the one from Star Wars Episode 1. "And traders," agreed Rerpf. Behind him now, in addition to more trolls, were several humans that Emor vaguely recognized. He had seen them, maybe, behind counters and bars, shadowy figures usually, easily ignored, easily forgotten. At the back of his mind, a bad feeling began to grow. He thought about how it might be to be, say, a fox confronted with an angry sheep. A sheep, moreover, that could afford to employ wolves. Did I mention how much I love Terry Pratchett's analogies? "How long has this guild been in existence, may I ask?" he said. "Oh, since this afternoon," said Rerpf. "I am Vice Guild Master in charge of tourism, you know. Tourism! They just created on the spot the tourist industry." This is brilliant. Oh man. "What is this tourism of which you speak?" We are not quite sure," said Rerpf. An old bearded man poked his head over the guildmaster's shoulder and cackled. "Speaking on behalf of the wine cellars of Morpork, tourism means business, see?" "Well," said Emor coldly. "Well," said Rerpf, "we're protecting our interests, like I said." "Thieves out! Thieves out!" cackled his elderly companion. Several others took up the chant. Slorf grinned. "And assassins too!" chanted the old man. Slorf growled. There is only one way this will be able to end. "Stands to reason," said Rerpf. "People robbing and murdering all over the place. What sort of impression are visitors going to take away? You come all the way to see our fine city with its many points of historical and civic interests. Also many quaint customs, and you wake up dead in some back alley, or as it might be, floating down the Ankh. How are you going to tell all your friends what a great time you're having? Let's face it, you got to move with the times. Visit fabulous Ankh-Morpork. You almost certainly won't end up dead." Slorf and Emor met each other's gaze. "We have we?" said Emor. Then let us move, brother. Together, Skeletor and Emor shall forge an alliance to defeat all of our enemies," agreed Slorf. In one movement, he brought his blowgun to his mouth and sent a dart hissing towards the nearest troll. It spun around, hurling its axe, which whirred over the assassin's head and buried itself in a luckless teeth behind him. Rerpf ducked, allowing a troll behind him to raise its huge iron crossbow and fire a spear-length quarrel into the nearest assassin. That was only the beginning. That was the start. That's what it actually says. Whew. Is this a great book or not? Whew. Okay. Oh, this is only getting better and better. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're having fun, Guide X Wheeler. Okay, moving on. Okay, cannot wait to see what happens next, even though I already know. It has been remarked before that those who are sensitive to radiations in the far octarine, the eighth color, the pigment of the imagination, can see things that others cannot. Thus it was that Rincewind, hurrying through the crowded, flare-lit evening bazaars of Morpork, with the luggage trundling behind him, jostled a tall dark figure, turned to deliver a few suitable curses, and beheld death. Oh yes. It had to be death. No one else went around with empty eye sockets, and of course the scythe over one shoulder was another clue. Oh, you mean this? You mean this scythe over here? Ah, is this the scythe you're meaning? Oh, huh? Do you see now why I brought this scythe into this picture? Ha ha ha! Best characters has just been introduced, my friends. Okay. Back you go. Let's continue on before death has entered the scene. Oh boy. As Rincewind stared in horror at courting people laughing at some private joke, walked straight through the apparition without appearing to notice it. Death, insofar as it was possible in a face with no movable features, looked surprised. "Rincewind?" Death said, in tones as deep and heavy as the slamming of leaden doors far underground. Nope," said Rincewind, trying to back away from the eyeless stare. "But why are you here?" Boom, boom went the crypt lids in the worm-haunted fastness under old mountains. But why not? Said Rincewind. Anyway, I'm sure you've got lots to do, so if you'll just... I was surprised that you jostled me, Rincewind, for I have an appointment this very night. Oh no, not... Of course, what's so bloody vexing about the whole business is that I was expecting to meet thee in Psephopolis, which is a real place, apparently. But that's 500 miles away. You don't have to tell me. The whole system's got screwed up again. I can see that. Look, there's no chance of you... Rincewind backed away, hands spread protectively in front of him. The dried fish salesman on a nearby stall watched this madman with interest. Not a chance. I could lend you a very fast horse. Please, will you go die? Please, will you die? No, it won't hurt a bit. Shifty eyes that he doesn't have. No! Rincewind turned and ran. Death watched him go and shrugged bitterly. Well, sod you then? Death said. I love this. He turned and noticed the fish salesman. With a snarl, Death reached out a bony finger and stopped the man's heart. But he didn't take much pride in it. He still did it. That was a bit childish for Death. Then Death remembered what was due to happen later that night. It would not be true to say that Death smiled, because in any case his features were perforce frozen in a calcurous grin, but he hummed a little tune, cheery as a plug pit, and, posing only to extract the life from a passing mayfly, and 1/9 of the lives from a cat cowering under the fish stall. All cats can see into the octarine, by the way. Death turned on his heel and set off towards the broken drum. This story. Okay, you've got to really like this story. I mean, one paragraph they're satirizing on the whole uh, lobbies and the tourist industry and making fun of guilds and other fantasy-related tropes. And in the next paragraph, boom, Death is a character. He's literally a character in the story, and he is a frustrated worker that doesn't always gets it right. And he's also a bit petty too, because oh, you'll see what I mean as this story progresses. I mean, wow. Ah. Instantly, this is the best character. Oh man. Oh boy. Oh, the color of magic indeed. Anyway, Short Street, Morpork, is in fact one of the longest in the city. Filigree Street crosses its turnwise end in the manner of the crosspiece of a T, and the broken drum is so placed that it looks down the full length of the street. At the furthermost end of Short Street, a dark oblong rose on hundreds of tiny legs and started to run. At first it moved at no more than a lumbering trot, but by the time it was halfway up the street it was moving narrow fast. A darker shadow inched its way along one of the walls of the drum, a few yards from the two trolls who were guarding the door. Rincewind was sweating. If they heard the faint clinking of the specially prepared bags at his belt, one of the trolls tapped his colleagues on the shoulder, producing a noise like two pebbles being knocked together. He pointed down at the starlit street. Rincewind darted from his hiding place, turned, and hurled his burden through the drum's nearest window. Distractions. Whittle saw it arrive. The bag arced across the room, turning slowly into the air, and burst on the edge of a table. A moment later, gold coins were rolling across the floor, spinning, glittering. The room was suddenly silent, save for the tiny noises of gold and the whimpers of the wounded. With a curse, Whittle dispatched the assassin he had been fighting. With a curse, Whittle dispatched the assassins he had been fighting. "It's a trick!" Which I guess it's another way to say it's a trap! He screamed, "No one move!" Threescore men and a dozen trolls froze in mid-group. Then, for the third time, the door burst open. Two trolls hurried through it, slammed it behind them, dropped the heavy bar across it, and fled down the stairs. That happened. And they did it faster than you could say that happened. Outside there was a sudden crescendo of running feet, and for the first time the door opened. Oh wait, I should say. And for the door opened. In fact, it exploded, the great wooden bar being hurled far across the room and the frame itself giving way. Door and frame landed on a table, which flew into splinters. It was then that the frozen fighters noticed that there was something else in the pile of wood. It was a box, shaking itself madly to free itself of the smashed timber around it. Rincewind appeared in the ruined doorway, hurling another of his gold grenades. It smashed into a wall, showering coins. Now, I must admit, the first time I read it, I wasn't quite clear what was the point of the gold grenades. But I think it's kind of obvious in retrospect that, well, you see how the luggage tends to behave when it comes to the possessions he's carrying, which means he's going to try to retrieve them, which also means it's going to waka, 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 waka. And if you happen to be nearby, well, you see what it can do to, well, human anatomy, so... This is one angry luggage, let me tell you. Down in the cellar, Broadman looked up, muttered to himself, and carried on with his work. His entire splendid winter supply of candles had already been strewn on the floor, mixed with his store of kindling woods. Now he was attacking a barrel of lamp oil. He's doing the whole Moses luck here. Insurance, he muttered. Oil gushed out and swirled around his feet. Whittle stormed across the floor, his face a mask of rage. Rincewind took careful aim and cut the thief full in the chest with a bag of gold. But now Emor was shouting and pointing an accusing finger. A raven swooped down from its perch in the rafters and dived at the wizard, talons open and gleaming. It didn't make it. At about the halfway point, the luggage leapt from its bed of splinters, gaped briefly in midair, and snapped shut. Poor raven. It landed lightly. Rincewind saw its lid open again slightly, just far enough for a tongue, large as a palm leaf, red as mahogany, to lick up a few errant feathers. This luggage is terrifying. At the same moment, the giant candle wheel fell from the ceiling, plunging the room into gloom. Rincewind, coiling himself like a spring, gave a standing jump and grasped the beam, swinging himself up into the relative safety of the roof with a strength that amazed him. "Exciting, isn't it?" said a voice by his ear. Down below, thieves, assassins, trolls, and merchants all realized at about the same moment that they were in a room made treacherous of foothold by gold coins and containing something among the suddenly menacing shapes in the semi-darkness that was absolutely horrible. As one, they made for the door, but had 24 different recollections of its exact position. High above the chaos, Rincewind stared at Two Flower. Did you cut the lights down?" he hissed. "Yes." "How come you're not up here? How come you're up here?" "I thought I'd better not get in everyone's way." He thought wisely. Rincewind considered this. There didn't seem to be much he could say. Two Flower added, "A real brawl! Better than anything I'd imagined. Do you think I ought to thank them, or did you arrange it?" Two Flowers. Rincewind looked at him blankly. "I think we ought to be getting down now," he said hollowly. "Everyone's gone." He dragged Two Flower across the littered floor and up the steps. They burst out into the tail end of the night. There were still a few stars, but the moon was down, and there was a faint grey glow to rimward. Most important, the street was empty. Rincewind sniffed. "Can you smell oil?" Then Whittle stepped out of the shadows and tripped him up. "Ah, Whittle, we meet again." I need some water. The intensity, can you feel it? Okay then. At the top of the cellar steps, Broadman knelt down and fumbled in his tinderbox. It turned out to be damp. Well, damp. "I'll kill that bloody cat," he muttered and groped for the spare box that was normally on the ledge by the door. It was missing. Broadman said a bad word. "Bad, Broadman, bad." A lighted taper appeared in midair, right beside him. "Here, take this." "Thanks," said Broadman. "Don't mention it." Broadman went to throw the taper down the steps. His hand paused in midair. He looked at the taper, his brow furrowing. Then he turned around and held the taper up to illuminate the scene. It didn't shed much light, but it did give the darkness a shape. "Oh no," he breathed. "But yes," said Death. This seems something out of a Looney Tunes gag, doesn't it? So Death literally directly caused the big fire that was mentioned at the beginning. I feel there is supposed to be a pun or a joke somewhere around this, but whatever, let's continue. Rincewind rolled. For a moment he thought Whittle was going to spit him where he lay, but it was worse than that. He was waiting for him to get up.
"I see you have a sword, wizard," he said quietly. "I suggest you rise, and we shall see how well you use it."
Rincewind stood up as slowly as he dared, and drew from his belt the short sword he had taken from the guard a few hours and 100 years ago. It was a short, blunt affair compared to Whittle's air-thin rapier. "But I don't know how to use a sword," he wailed.
"Good!"
"You know that wizards can be killed by edged weapons," said Rincewind desperately. Whittle smiled coldly. "So I have heard," he said.
"I look forward to putting it to the test." He lunged.
Rincewind caught the thrust by sheer luck, jerked his hand away in shock, deflected the second stroke by coincidence, and took the third one through his robe at heart height. Well, this was a short story. Goodbye. There was a clink. Whittle's snarl of triumph died in his throat. He drew the sword out and prodded again at the wizard, who was rigid with terror and guilt. There was another clink, and gold coins began to drop out of the hem of the wizard's robe.
"So you bleed gold, do you?"
hissed Whittle.
"But have you got gold concealed in that raggedy beard, you little—" "Why, you little—"
As his sword went back for his final sweep, the sullen glow that had been growing in the doorway of the broken drum flickered, dimmed, and erupted into a roaring fireball that sent the walls billowing outward and carried the roof 100 feet into the air before bursting through it in a gout of red-hot tiles. I think the bar just exploded. Whittle stared at the building flames, unnerved, and Rincewind leapt. He ducked under the thief's sword arm and brought his own blade around in an arc so incompetently misjudged that it hit the man flat first and jolted out of the wizard's hand. Sparks and droplets of flaming oil rained down as Whittle reached out with both gauntlet hands and grabbed Rincewind's neck, forcing him down.
"You did this? Somehow?"
he screamed.
"You and your box of trickery!"
His pump found Rincewind's windpipe. This is it, the wizard thought. Wherever I'm going, it can't be worse than here. "Excuse me," said to Flower. Rincewind felt the grip lessen, and now Whittle was slowly getting up, a look of absolute hatred on his face. A glowing hammer landed on the wizard. He brushed it off hurriedly and scrambled to his feet. The Flower was behind Whittle, holding the man's own needle-sharp sword with the point resting in the small of the thief's back. "Good going, to Flower." Rincewind's eyes narrowed. He reached into his robe, then withdrew his hand, bunched into a fist. "Don't move," he said. "Am I doing this right?" asked the Flower anxiously. "He says he'll skewer your liver if you move," Rincewind translated freely.
"I doubt it,"
said Whittle. "Bet?"
"No."
As Whittle tensed himself to turn on the tourist, Rincewind lashed out and caught the thief on the jaw. Whittle stared at him in amazement for a moment, and then quietly toppled into the mud. "Go, Rincewind." The wizard uncurled his stinging fist, and the roll of gold coins slipped between his throbbing fingers. Well, an improvised brass knuckles using gold coins. That's creative, wizard. He looked down at the recumbent thief. Good grief, he gasped. Good grief indeed. He looked up and yelled as another ember landed on his neck. Flames were racing along the rooftops on either side of the street. All around him, people were hurling possessions from windows and dragging horses from smoking stables. Another explosion in the white-hot volcano that was the drum sent a whole marble mantelpiece scything overhead. Whew. The Withershin's gate's the nearest, Rincewind shouted above the crackle of collapsing rafters. Come on! He grabbed Two Flowers' reluctant arm and dragged him down the street. My luggage! Blast your luggage! Stay here much longer and you'll go where you don't need luggage. Come on! Screamed Rincewind. They jogged on through the crowd of frightened people leaving the area, while the wizard took great mouthfuls of cool down air. Something was puzzling him. I'm sure all the candles went out, he said. So how did the drum catch fire? I don't know. Why don't you ask Death? I don't know, moaned Two Flower. It's terrible, Rincewind. We were getting along so well, too. Not amused. Rincewind stopped in astonishment, so that another refugee cannoned into him and spun away with an oath. Getting on? Yes, a great bunch of fellows, I thought. Language was a bit of a problem, but they were so keen for me to join their party, they just wouldn't take no for an answer. Oh boy. Really friendly people, I thought. Rincewind started to correct him, then realized he didn't know how to begin. It'll be a blow for old Broadman. In more ways than one. Oh boy. Two Flower continued. Still, he was wise. I've still got the Renu he paid as his first premium. Insurance. Rincewind didn't know the meaning of the word premium, but his mind was working fast. You insured the drum? He said. You bet Broadmoney wouldn't catch fire? Oh yes, standard violation. 200 Reimu. Why do you ask? In a really bizarre roundabout way, this is all Two Flowers' fault. In a more direct way, Death. But in the grand scheme of things, history will tell you that, yes, you don't want to mess with tourists. Rincewind turned and stared at the flames racing towards them and wondered how much of Ankh-Morpork could be bought for 200 Renu. Quite a large piece, he decided, only not now, not the way those flames were moving. He glanced out at the tourist. You! He began and searched his memory for the worst word in the Trub tongue. The happy little betrothed didn't really know how to swear properly. You! He repeated. Another hurrying figure bumped into him, narrowly missing him with the blade over its shoulder. Rincewind's tortured temper exploded. You little... Such a one who, while wearing a copper-nosed ring, stands in a footbath atop Mount Rar during a heavy thunderstorm and shouts at Halohura, goddess of lightning, as the facial features of a diseased Olurua root. Don't you love languages? Just doing my job, said the figure, stalking away. Every word fell as heavily as slabs of marble. Moreover, Rincewind was certain that he was the only one who heard them. He grabbed Two Flower again. let's get out of here, he suggested. Okay, the next one should be the final part of the first part of this tale. And once I'm done with it, this is where the stream is going to end, because I think I read enough for enough time. But before that, I might answer some questions if you have any. Right. Water. I have the microphone here, and the water is over there. So I have to... Well, this was really intense, wasn't it? I think it was. One interesting side effect of the fire in Ankh-Morpork concerns the inn sewer ants policy, which left the city through the ravaged roof of the broken drum, was wafted high into the Discworld's atmosphere on the ensuing thermal, and came to Earth several days and a few thousand miles away on an Uluru bush in the Beachrobbie Islands. The simple laughing islanders subsequently worshipped it as a god, much to the amusement of their more sophisticated neighbors. Strangely enough, the rainfall and harvests in the next few years were almost supernaturally abundant, and this led to a research team being dispatched to the islands by the minor religious faculty of Unseen University. Their verdict was that it only went to show. And this, I believe, is the payoff for that old Beachrobbie language thing. It's a great payoff, comedically wise. So, the fire, driven by the wind, spread out from the drum faster than a man could walk. The timbers of the Withershin's gate were already on fire when Rincewind, his face blistered and reddened from the flames, reached them. By now, he and Two Flower were on horseback. Mounts hadn't been that hard to obtain. A wily merchant had asked 50 times their worth and had been left gaping when 1,000 times their worth had been pressed into his hands. They rode through just before the first of the big gate timbers descended in an explosion of sparks. Morpork was already a cauldron of flame. As they galloped up the red-lit road, Rincewind glanced sideways at his traveling companion, currently trying hard to learn to ride a horse. "Bloody hell!" he thought. "He's alive! Me too! Who'd have thought it? Perhaps there is something in this reflected sound of underground spirits?" It was a cumbersome phrase. Rincewind tried to get his tongue round the thick syllables that were the word in Two Flower's own language. Echolyrics, he tried. Echronothics? Economics. That would do. That sounded about right. Several hundred yards downriver from the last smoldering suburb of the city, a strangely rectangular and apparently heavily waterlogged object touched the mud of the Withershin's bank. Immediately it sprouted numerous legs and scrabbled for a purchase. Nothing is going to kill this luggage. Holding itself to the top of the bank of the luggage, streaked with soot, stained with water, and very, very angry, shook itself and took its bearings. Then it moved away at a brisk trot. The small and incredibly ugly imp that was perching on its lid, watching the scenery with interest. The imp is back, and now we're back to the present. Braved looked at the weasel and raised his eyebrows. "And that's it," said Rincewind. "The luggage caught up with us. Don't ask me how. Is there any more wine?" The weasel picked up the empty wineskin. "I think you had just about enough wine this night," he said. Braved forehead wrinkled. "Gold is gold," he said finally. "How can a man with plenty of gold consider himself poor? You're either poor or rich. It stands to reason."
It stands to reason.
Rincewind hiccuped. He was finding reason rather difficult to hold on to. Well, he said, what I think is, the point is, well, you know Octeron? The two adventurers nodded. I'm burping a lot, I apologize for that. It's the water, you see. The two adventurers nodded. The strange iridescent metal was almost as highly valued in the lands around the Circle Sea as sapient pear wood, and was about as rare. A man who owned a needle made of octeron would never lose his way, since it always pointed to the hub of the Discworld. Being acutely sensitive to the disc's magical field, it would also miraculously darn his socks. Okay. Well, my point is, you see, that gold also has its sort of magical field, sort of financial wizardly. You mean like economics? Economics. Yes, Rincewind giggled. The weasel stood up and stretched. The sun was well up now, and the city below them was wreathed in mists and full of foul vapors. Also gold, he decided. Even a citizen of Morpork would, at the very point of death, desert his treasure to save his skin. Time to move. The little man called to Flower appeared to be asleep. The weasel looked down at him and shook his head. The city awaits, such as it is, he said. Thank you for a pleasant tale, wizard. What will you do now? He eyed the luggage, which immediately backed away and snapped its lid at him. Well, there are no ships leaving the city now, giggled Rincewind. I suppose we'll take the coast road to Chirm. I've got to look after him, you see. But look, I didn't make it. Sure, said the weasel soothingly. He turned away and swung himself into the saddle of the horse that Bravd was holding. A few moments later, the two heroes were just specks under a cloud of dust, heading down towards the charcoal city. Rincewind stared muzzily at the recumbent tourist. At two recumbent tourists. In his somewhat defenseless state, a stray thought, wandering through the dimensions in search of a mind to harbor it, slid into his brain. Here's another fine mess you've got me into, he moaned, and slumped backwards. Mad, said the weasel. Bravd, galloping along a few feet away, nodded. All wizards get like that, he said. It's the quicksilver fumes. Rots their brains. Mushrooms, too. You mean one-ups are actually dangerous to your health? Huh. However, said the brown-clad one, he reached into his tunic and took out a golden disc of a short chain. Bravd raised his eyebrows. The wizard said that the little man had some sort of golden disc that told him the time, said the weasel. Arousing your cupidity, little friend? You always were an expert thief, weasel. Aye, agreed the weasel modestly. He touched the knob of the disc's rim, and it flipped open. The very small demon imprisoned within looked up from its tiny abacus and scowled. It lacks but 10 minutes till 8 at the clock. It snarled. The lid slammed shut, almost trapping the weasel's fingers. With an oath, the weasel hurled the time teller far into the heather, where it possibly hit a stone. Something, in any event, caused the case to split. There was a vivid octarine flash and a whiff of brimstone as the time being vanished into whatever demonic dimension it called home. What did you do that for? Said Bravd, who hadn't been close enough to hear the words. Do what? Said the weasel. I didn't do anything. Nothing happened at all. Come on, we're wasting opportunities. Shifty eyes. Bravd nodded. Together, they turned their steeds and galloped towards ancient Ankh, an honest enchantment. And this concludes part 1 of The Color of Magic, which is also titled The Color of Magic. Next part is The Sending of 8, which is my personal favorite part, actually. If only for the heavy Lovecraftian implications. But that's a story for another time. But do not worry, Death is still going to be there to bother Rincewind any way he could. Oh man. All right. I'm basically done here, but are there any questions that you want to ask me before we conclude this? Any questions at all? Like I said, there is like a 30 seconds delay in between me talking and how it's actually broadcast. Okay, I'll be waiting for a couple. I'll be tired. So, any queries that you want me to answer? Bum, 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 bum. Oh yes, yes. Guidexviller. That's actually a very important question that you just asked me. There is a video game that is based on this. Yes, my friend, there are at least 3 video games based on this one. And guess what? Me and my colleague slash associate slash friend Davar Akvaran are actually recording a Let's Play video series of the first game that was ever made of Discworld, which is an interesting beast in its own right. From a setting, it's like a mishmash of every little elements from any of the little books from the Discworld series, but in a context that is less actually to do with the Terry Pratchett's own style of humor, and more with the madcap zany comedy you would expect from the Monty Python show, which makes sense considering that Rincewind, the main character of the game, is actually voiced by Eric Idle. I hope that answered your query, because yes, you'll be seeing those videos sooner or later on this channel. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but it is going to happen eventually. Davar is the one who's editing all of them, so it depends on his work. Well, if there are no other questions you want me to ask, then I think I'll interrupt the stream here. I'm just going to wait for the broadcast to catch up on me. I will answer one more question, and then I'll be shutting it down. Da-da-da-da-da-ding, da-da-da-ding, da-da-da-ding, da-da-da-ding. You don't seem to have any more questions to ask, so this has been going on for about 2 hours and 10 minutes, more or less. So I think I'm just going to interrupt the stream here. Sorry for if the last minute was just me wasting time. You know, well, I'll be seeing you next time. I may be continuing this, but I may also start something else entirely and pause, take a break from this and start reading something else, that is. It will depend on what is the mood in which I find myself into that evening. Also, I might do this next week or 2 weeks from now. I don't know where I'm going to do it. Oh. In any case, thank you for joining, everybody. And see you when I see you. Madhog out. Madhog out in right now.